What's going on? Jake here with Uncommon EDC, and today I'm checking out the Benchmade Mini Adamas, which is going to run you around $225. I have it on this Blade HQ shop mat. Hopefully that'll help a little bit. It is a black knife, and my typical black background is black, so hoping it won't get as washed out on camera, but black never really appears super great on camera, so hopefully that'll help, but we'll see. Now, I didn't actually pay for this knife directly. I got it in the Going Gear EDC Club Premium subscription for December of 2021, which was the first month they did the Premium Club, and this was the premium item that month. And it was also the first video I uploaded on my YouTube back in February. And so this is where it was worth more than the full value. You pay $200 for that Premium Club, so it's worth more than the full value, meaning that you got everything in the standard for free, or you got this at a discount depending on how you look at it. But either way, it was a really good value for that first box, and a knife that was on my radar in terms of just kind of knowing about it, but not something that I had ever planned to buy, actually. I'm not super into tactical looking knives, and so I do like the look of this, but it just wasn't my typical style of knife, and so probably would have never picked it up. So really glad it came in that box, because I actually like this knife quite a bit. Now, it's called the Mini Adamas, or Adamas. I believe it's pronounced Adamas, which doesn't sound as natural as Adamas to me, so I may mispronounce that a few times. But it's called the Mini, and it's really only mini in comparison to the full-size Adamas. When you look at some of the other mini Benchmades, which I only have one of them now, I have the Mini Reptilian on the way, and I plan on getting the Mini Osborne at some point. But the Mini Bug Out is significantly smaller. If I line it up kind of pivot to pivot, you'll see that you have almost an inch in both directions, maybe 3/4 of an inch actually, in both directions. So it's significantly smaller knife, weight-wise, thickness-wise, length-wise, all around just a smaller knife. And so this actually feels like a mini knife. The Mini Adamas is much more comparable to most of the full-size knives in the Benchmade lineup. And so I have 3 of the more common ones from their lineup that most people that have a Benchmade will probably have one of these 3. And if not, I'll give the actual dimensions once I'm done with these size comparisons. But in comparison to the full-size Bug Out, you will see that it is almost identical. It's slightly larger actually than the full-size Bug Out. Just a little bit on the handle side, it's just a little bit longer, not significantly so, but it is slightly larger. And the other thing you'll notice is just in terms of the blade stock, this one's about 0.14 inches thick, and it is significantly thicker than that Bug Out. And so that's going to be the most dramatic difference, is just the thickness of it in comparison to the Bug Out. It's a little bit more comparable to the next knife, which I have is the Benchmade Reptilian. And so this is a pretty large knife, and actually a little bit larger than the Mini Adamas, both in blade and handle. It's a little bit thicker as well, and so this is probably the most comparable in size just overall, and it's still slightly thinner in that blade stock, not significantly so, but I'm guessing, I didn't measure it out, I'm guessing the Reptilian is probably about 0.12 inches, where this one's probably about 0.14. And the last knife I have to compare it to is the Benchmade Osborne. And again, this one's slightly longer. It's a little bit sleeker, but slightly longer, and pretty comparable still though. You know, it's not significantly different. So even though this has mini in the name, I would think of it the same way you would think of Benchmade's kind of full-size lineup. And again, it's going to be a little bit thinner, obviously at the base, much thinner at the tip of the knife compared to the Mini Adamas. And this is probably one of the sharpest factory edges I've ever gotten from Benchmade. They don't typically have great edges when you get them, but this one was extremely sharp out of the box, and it was a puncture wound, but gave me my worst cut ever from any knife I have in my collection. And that's actually over on my Instagram if you want. It's the same as my YouTube channel, Uncommon EDC. You probably have to scroll down a little bit. Maybe I'll put in the description what date I posted it, so you kind of have a sense of when it is. It's not particularly gruesome. I took it after I had already stopped the bleed, but it is a pretty deep wound, and so a little bit gross, so if you're squeamish, I guess don't look at it. But in terms of the actual dimensions of this knife, if you don't have one of the comparable knives, it's 3.25 inch blade. It's a CPM-Cruwear Drop Point style blade. again, 0.14 inch thick in the blade stock. The handle is 4.37 inches, bringing the overall length to 7.62 inches. And it weighs in at 4.6 ounces, which makes it feel a little bit bigger than it is. It's kind of a hefty knife. Its weight to blade ratio is a little bit on the heavy side. And before I did the video and pulled out the other Benchmades, I actually assumed this was larger than all of the Benchmades, although the Reptilian's actually a little bit larger. It's just deceptively, I guess not deceptively large. You would think that it's larger than it is in your hand. It just feels a little bit bigger. But really comfy Ergos on this. I like the coating quite a bit on here. It's this kind of gray Cerakote. And the olive version has a tan, and I like both of them a lot. It looks really nice on here, and it's really well done. The scales are actually G10, but they're a really nicely done version of G10. There's almost got like a wood grain finish. Hopefully that'll pick up on camera in the lighting. But it's got a kind of wood grain finish to it. Really like the pattern on here quite a bit. It's got some grooves carved into here as well as some holes drilled out, probably for weight saving, but also makes it nice that it's pretty accessible without disassembling it to get in there. If you want to clean something up, you can slide a Q-tip in there pretty easily and kind of clean up a little bit. And so that's really nice. Ergos are really comfortable. There's kind of this nice swoop in front of the jimping, which my thumb rests on really nicely. It's just kind of well placed and feels very natural. No real hot spots, although two minor gripes I have about the Ergos are the jimping on the interior of the handle. I don't mind the index one so much because it's not super noticeable, but for whatever reason I'm always very aware of this jimping down by the pinky. Able to get a nice full 4-finger grip on there, but always very aware of that jimping. It's not a hot spot by any means, but I always feel it. And so I could definitely live without that. Not the biggest deal in the world, but if I were designing it, it would definitely take that out. And then the other thing is the pocket clip. Again, not a hot spot by any means, but I feel it quite a bit. And I could just remove the pocket clip because I don't use it anyway. I'm lazy, so I haven't, but you definitely feel it also. It's, again, not a hot spot for the light tasks that I'm using it for. The jimping I can't imagine becoming a hot spot, but that pocket clip I can imagine if I were doing a lot of heavy use tasks, which it seems like because of that thick stock, that's what this knife is intended for. And if I'm using it for a lot of heavy use for a prolonged period of time, I do feel like that pocket clip may become a hot spot. So, two really minor gripes. I definitely don't hate it by any means. I actually like this knife quite a bit, but if I were to change anything, I would probably, and the pocket clip's obviously very much in my control, but would probably get rid of that jimping. Now, the only real gripe I have about it is there is a little bit of lock stick. It's not too bad, especially if you kind of barely flick it open or slow roll it, you're not going to get any lock stick whatsoever. But if you put some wrist behind it or really flick it out of there, I'm not sure how well this will pick up, but you definitely get some lock stick. And so it's not too bad, but it's there, it's noticeable. Obviously would prefer if it weren't there, so again, not a major gripe because I'm not doing a lot of like wrist flicking. I'm usually just kind of flicking it open normally. And there's no lock stick in that case. A little bit of your standard billboarding from Benchmade. You have the Benchmade logo on the show side. On the back side, you have the CPM-Cruwear stamp, which is a great steel. And you have the designer stamp, which is Sibert design. And so I believe that's Shane Sibert. Now, it is a Benchmade, so it's going to be USA made, fully ambidextrous, which most Benchmades are. You have the ambidextrous access lock, which, for those that aren't familiar with the access lock, it looks like you could just do this with one hand, but you're not going to disengage it, and you might actually damage the lock manipulating it with one hand, so you always want to use 2 fingers to disengage that lock. And so that works really well. Obviously, dual-sided thumb studs, and the pocket clip is fully reversible. Now, it is a deep carry pocket clip. If you like, you can replace it with their mini deep carry. This is a full-size version. And on the black one, at least, it's got the black-coated version of the pocket clip. I'm not sure about the tan model. I'm pretty sure the burgundy does also have the black version, which is going to show signs of wear after a while if you care about that. not the biggest deal in the world, but you're starting to see a little bit of paint come through and some snail trilling on that pocket clip, which again isn't the biggest deal in the world, but if you care about that, you may want to replace it with a satin finish pocket clip or just remove it altogether. And you'll see kind of how on the Reptilian what it'll look like after kind of years of use. You'll definitely start seeing mostly along the edges. This one's not too bad still, and this one's one of my more carried pocket knives. Not recently, but I've had it for a very long time, and so it's definitely got a lot of pocket time on it. And so just really along the edges, you're starting to see a lot of that wear, which I think actually looks kind of nice. I don't mind it, but again, if you do, you can replace them with the satin finish version. Overall, super happy with this knife. Again, some minor gripes on the Ergos and lock stick, but both of them are pretty minor. They don't affect my enjoyment of this knife. I really am glad that Going Gear included in the box, again, because I probably wouldn't have bought it. And had I bought it, I probably would have gotten the olive version just because I like the look of it a little bit better with the olive scales and the tan Cerakote. But again, overall, super happy with this knife, so I'm glad it was included in the box. I am somewhat interested now in checking out the full-size Adamas. It's probably a little bit larger than I'd like to EDC. Typically, when I'm looking for an EDC knife, I like that 7 to 7.5 inch kind of mark. This is slightly larger, but still within the range that I like for an EDC knife. And so that full-size Adamas is going to be bigger than I typically like to EDC. And again, that's just because I'm not using them for heavy tasks on a day-to-day basis. And if I am, I can bring one of those knives. But most days, I'm good with a 3 to 3.5 inch blade. And so this is kind of in that sweet spot, whereas a full-size Adamas is going to be a little bit larger than I would typically carry. And it's also a little bit pricier, but not significantly. So I think it's around $250, so not too bad. Yeah, I may check it out at some point now that I've handled this one, but it's not super high on my priority list, so it's not going to be anytime soon. But if I find a good deal on it, I may check them out down the road. But if you have this knife, or even if you don't, let me know what you think of it down in the comments below. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. And as always, I hope you have a great one. Take care.